Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Dominica. I'll be your host for today, and today's session is super special. We're really lucky to have our friends from Simplify here today. The presenter for today is Beth McGreen, and she is a Senior Solution Director from Simplify Solutions. The topic for today is end-to-end planning capabilities using SAP Analytics Cloud. We realize there's a lot of you who are really curious about SAP Analytics Cloud planning specifically, and there's not maybe as much as you would like out there. So we're catering to your questions and to your needs, and here we have our planning webinar for you guys today. Before I hand the mic over to Beth today, I'd like to go over some of the housekeeping items just to make sure we're all happy and familiar with the webinar console space. So there's a lot of you guys in today's webinar. So first thing I'll say, if you have any questions, please send us your questions through the Q&A widget that is on your screen. And we're kind of expecting a larger audience today, so we have a lot of people on the back end here answering your questions. We have Eric Blodden here, John Essig, and Lauren Milojevic, and they will be answering your questions as we go. Today's session is jam-packed. We have a lot of content to go through, a lot of demo content to go through, so we're not going to have a Q&A session at the end like we sometimes do in webinars. So make sure to send us your questions at any point using the Q&A widget, and then we'll get to you as soon as we can throughout the webinar. The next thing I'll mention is resources. So a lot of you ask for slides for webinars, so you can download them from the resources box that is on your screen. And then there's also, I put a link for you all that is for upcoming webinars. We have a really big full schedule for the month of May, so make sure to check that out. There's probably a lot that might help your job or whatever your needs are. So make sure to check out the webinars for this month. And then the last thing I would mention is our survey. It really helps us a lot if you guys give us feedback on how you like today's session and any future sessions that you would like to see. So do let us know what you think. You can access the survey by clicking on the 3 smiley faces on the bottom toolbar. And it's only 2 questions, so it shouldn't take too long. And it really helps me planning webinars that are helpful to you. All right, so that is it for the introduction. If you have any questions, please send them over through the Q&A box, and I'll pass it over now to Beth to take it over.
All right, well, thanks, Dominica. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. My name is Beth McGreen, and I am a Solutions Director at Simplify Solutions. And today we are talking, all about planning, and yes, you guessed it, more planning. We're going to plan to provide lots of different sample content for you for various types of planning. So, kind of as the agenda suggests, we're not just talking today about P&L planning at a GL account level for kind of your, basic template. We really want to go deeper and beyond that to show you the different planning areas, planning scenarios that really Analytics Cloud can capture. Because of, the ability and the planning environment being so robust, it really allows to extend that planning capability into areas where you might not have thought before or may have been kind of difficult. So, hopefully today we'll be able to kind of show you some of those areas where before, really, and how to navigate through Analytics Cloud and utilize it from a multiple planning and different planning scenarios. I do recognize that this is kind of going to be a tight time frame, as Dominica mentioned, and so I do have my colleagues here with me today to be able to answer the questions in the chat box. Certainly my information also will be shared, so if you do have any questions or we weren't able to get to those questions, we're very happy to help you along the way and help answer any questions we can. All right, so just a 2-minute intro just so you understand who Simplify is. Obviously we're a SAP implementation partner. And really, we're a niche firm. We focus primarily around solutions related to the analytics, planning, and consolidations. For many of our consulting base, BPC, business planning and consolidation, was kind of our original footprint. And we've really continued to grow and expand into this SAP Analytics Cloud solution. We have the main group of our consultants are finance-oriented. They're MBAs, they're CPAs. They understand the FP&A process, the consolidation process, so on and so forth. But we also do have a side of the house that's focused more on our platform and technology, including integration as well. So, we really are a well-rounded small firm that ultimately is very focused on our customer success. Okay, enough about us. So, let's start talking about planning. And wanted to bring up, I have a few slides here, just a couple to go through, and then I'm going to launch into the live demonstration. I feel like being able to show you the content and see how the different areas and different planning scenarios play together really is more impactful. But just to kind of set the stage, wanted to put a couple slides out here first. And the first one really is around the concept of what we're discussing today, and that's around collaborative enterprise planning. Okay, so this may end up being the new acronym, an acronym that you're going to start to hear more often. No longer is a planning solution just a corporate-owned corporate performance management, right? You may have heard in the past the CPM solutions. This is really where we're looking at collaborative enterprise planning, where we're able to take the sales organization and take their sales plan, right? Be able to look at HR planning, workforce planning, down to your headcount, your employee level planning, reaching out to your supply chain, grabbing those demand plans, right? Being able to do demand planning within Analytics Cloud. So all of those areas that maybe in the past have been kind of either black box, off to the side, where you're provided guidance from these groups, really now all these drivers, all these components can come together in one cohesive solution, which is, Analytics Cloud. So hopefully we're going to show you a little bit about that today, and give you a better understanding of how we can do that with different scenarios, different versions, and such. We talk about Analytics Cloud, Plan Simple. So a lot of the things that we're going to see in the demonstration today are part of these bullet points here. So being able to have some predictive forecasting, looking at our budgets, our plans from a top-down view versus bottoms-up, certainly having driver-based, right, and having these automated calculations around with all the collaboration that goes into account as well when we're looking at kind of the overall planning scenarios and planning environment. Variance analysis reporting and some obviously allocations and all of that. So all that kind of gets wrapped together. But just a reminder of the typical planning functionality that really exists within Analytics Cloud. So I have, this slide really, while, we look at objects like our stories in Analytics Cloud, right, that are instrumental and are probably the vehicle to our planning, right? There are templates there where we're keying in information. I just like to call out how important that data actions are as part of that automation of your overall plan. You're going to see throughout the live demonstration today several data actions. It's kind of our gateway to all the calculations, the computations that we need for planning. Whether we're seeding a budget with prior year actuals, maybe we're calculating those drivers to be able to produce our net sales, to produce our gross profit, or allocating different overhead dollars. We all can achieve that through a data action. These data actions are placed directly on the story. It's easy to access, easy to execute. And then, as I mentioned before, with some of those different, like feeding the budget and those type of things, those are included in copy functionality that is included in data actions, cross-model copy. So this could be an example where I have in a live demonstration where we may have HR planning that is at a very detailed level that we want to summarize and load up into my salaries line and my cost center planning, right? So being able to push or transfer data across models that may have different levels of detail or need or require separate models because of security reasons. And of course, things like advanced formulas. This is that rich scripting capability where we can produce those drivers. We can produce those automations that help kind of facilitate the overall planning process. And finally, as I mentioned, alongside with the data actions, the other piece that really helps the automation would be the allocations, right? They have pretty easy functionality to create with the allocations. You can create complex allocations. They can be pretty simplistic. They can be multi-step, but it actually has a really nice interface to be able to create the allocation, the underlying allocation, and how you execute it. You also now can execute those allocations as part of your data action, which is nice and convenient as well. All right, so before I jump over to the live demonstration, this is actually the launch pad that we're going to start our presentation, our live demo off of. But just wanted to point out that we have built these prepackaged solutions. We have several of these accelerators, kind of jump starts in these different planning areas, and where we've actually been able to help customers, solve some of their business problems. We do have more information on our website if you're interested. I'm hopefully going to be able to share as much as I possibly can with you today and kind of go through some of the items. Might have to be at a little bit higher level. So if you see something on the screen that I don't click in and dive into a little bit further, but it interests you, certainly let us know. And we can definitely provide that information or provide a one-off demonstration for you so that you get a better understanding of that planning concept. All right. Without further ado, let me share my screen. Give me one moment. Okay.
Yep, we can see your screen, Beth. And just for everyone who may be wondering, the demonstration will be in your media player box that's on your screen. So it should have kind of maximized at this moment, but feel free to move the boxes around however you like. So the demo will be in the media player box, and then the slides are still in your slide box for anyone who's wondering. All right, go ahead, Beth.
All right, thanks, Dominica. All right, so where we're starting here is basically what kind of I consider our general finance dashboard. We've got different areas where we can launch into. For today's presentation, we're going to focus mainly on the bottom row here. So we've got some other analytics and reporting up top. Really, we're kind of talking about planning, obviously. And so we're going to cover some topics around our sales and margin planning, launching into our expense planning. And then maybe, again, kind of peeling back that onion a little bit from expense planning, how do we build up our HR or workforce plan, as well as capital planning. If I have time, I will also show a little bit on working capital as well. So we'll kind of see how timing works out here. So where I'm going to start, again, we kind of consider this a launch pad, so I can go ahead and click on my sales and margin planning, and that actually brings in a launch pad directly or specifically for sales and margin. So here you can see this is just where I can have some visualizations, but as well, I also have my budget process steps. So again, kind of facilitating the process for your users. And so some of the steps here that we're going to cover: target setting, right? Looking at high-level volume planning for our sales drivers, things like our average selling price, standard cost, things of that nature. Here I have standard costing, revenue planning assumptions will be probably at a high level covered. What I mean by revenue planning assumptions is you may have sales for a particular month that we're capturing that are not going to be 100% revenue, where we need to actually defer revenue for future contracts or other, so that there's built-in functionality that we have that allows you to do that. So that's kind of what the assumptions mean there. We've got capabilities for transfer pricing, and then we kind of wrap it up with P&L review. So again, that may be some typical steps that you may have in regards to your sales and margin planning. So want to start, I'm going to click on the link that says P&L, our target setting. Okay, opens up my story, and you'll notice that I have different filters along the top, and then I have a number of different tabs here. So within here, it opens up to my setting targets. So a couple things to call out is, I have my actual data. I have for 2019, I have my forecast. So my forecast may be my full year. This may be actuals through Q3, for example. Annual budget, if we're looking at gross profit here, we have nothing yet. Annual budget is what we're going to consider in this example, our bottoms up. This is where the users are going to provide those drivers, provide the detail, and we're going to go ahead and calculate and aggregate that up. But as we know, there's additional, target or top-down guidance that is provided from executive leadership, and so before I do that, I just want to click over to my tab that says Predictive and Scenarios. And so here again, I can see that I don't have a target yet. So we're assuming target really is our top-down approach, annual budget is our bottoms-up. One of the other approaches within Analytics Cloud that I think is extremely powerful is really kind of the combination of the predictive forecasting along with the version management. So just to kind of give you an idea, so if I click here in my report, and I'm going to click on our version management. So for those of you that are new to planning, aren't familiar with the term version management, basically version management is just your different planning scenarios, your different categories, if you will, versions of data. So we have actual, we've got one that's an actual versus budget, we've got an annual budget, we've got target and forecast. These are all public versions. Those are versions that everyone's able to see. But me as Beth, as the user, I also have the ability to create private versions for quick scenario planning, where I may want to change some drivers or take a look at some things, and I don't have to necessarily have it published to a public version. So it actually makes it very flexible. With other planning solutions, you're maybe stuck asking an administrator to create a version for you as more of a sandbox or a what-if scenario planning. This allows you to do that kind of on the fly. So if I take budget, for example, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy it, I'm going to call this Predictive Plan. Okay. I'm going to create a blank version. You can see here that I can copy all my data if I wanted, or I could choose what data to copy. But for here, if I just wanted to do a scenario on one particular country or one particular company code, I could certainly do that and limit what I was going to copy over. But here I'm just going to create a blank version. Okay. So when I do that, it automatically, you can see here my private versions, it says Predictive Plan, and it pops up here in my report, Predictive Plan. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of my version management. Here's what I need. So here's what's really neat, is that now I have an empty scenario. And so I'm going to actually run my Predictive Forecast, which is up here. I'm going to select Predictive Forecast. I can see that my prediction target is operating income. So I'll look at full operating income. Where is the output version going to go? It's going to go to my new Predictive Plan version. I'm going to change my granularity to the year because I want to go ahead and predict the entire year. And just to check in my advanced options, I can see that my algorithm, output values, and then really what I'm looking at data from actuals all the way back to 2016. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use all that and click Preview. So this takes a couple seconds. It compiles, it's going back using actual historical data back through 2016. And then we'll provide basically in the predictive forecast for me. So here I can see solid line. These are my actuals, my actual operating income for each one of those years. And here's where it's this dotted line starts my prediction. And this is where it ends up, and you can see with also kind of the upper and lower bounds as well. So here's what it's predicting for the year, and I can go ahead and I can say OK, and it will automatically populate my Predictive Plan version. So now, as I work towards, I automatically, without having to do a lot of work, I have to go and compile data in Excel, or all the data is here in Analytics Cloud. I was able to run a very quick predictive plan that gives me another source to compare to, right, to compare against that annual budget or that bottoms up. So predictive plan being one, obviously target being the second one. So I'm going to go back and set my targets here. Come back to my target setting. And you can notice here that it's for you. So here I can go in and, again, just like any other template, I can key in, if I'm assuming maybe 22 million, I have it scaled here. Notice I can key the numbers directly in, not a problem, but there is a little bit of a problem because the way that Analytics Cloud works, if there's no data already seeded or in there, it is absolutely going to disaggregate all the way down to your base level because we're doing this at a full year target. We're doing it for all countries, all company codes, right? So if I actually look at the countries and I select Canada, for example, it'll refresh and it's going to say 2 million. But then if I select Germany, it's also going to say 2 million. So that really doesn't give us a good target disaggregation if we're going to set things at a top level. So I'm going to delete that out. And I'm going to use, here we go with our data actions, where I can actually seed it. I'm going to use my forecast, note my forecast in my report, and I'm going to go ahead and seed that to my target, 2000. So basically, forecast is going to have my actuals plus my forecast for the last quarter. So I'm going to use that and use that those weighted averages, that seasonality to apply. And so you can see that the two agree. Now I can go ahead and I can type over, right, and perhaps I'm going to do, I'll just make some round numbers here. Okay, so now when I go back in and I change my numbers from Canada to Germany, now I have, more meaningful targets, right, to compare to. Right, so at this point, I've created a target, I've created a predictive plan. Now it's time to kind of jump in and take a look at that bottoms-up approach to my sales and margin planning. If I click over real fast to my predictive and scenarios, you can see here, okay, now my target's been updated, my predictive plan is there. And again, so the next step would be to take a look at my bottoms-up, really going from volumes and applying those drivers. Okay, so I'm going to leave that open and go back to my launch pad. I'm going to go ahead and click on my volume planning link. All right. So as far as volume planning goes, we have a template that basically takes a look at our actuals. We have, similar to how we seeded the target with our forecast, we can do the same thing with volumes. So we can go ahead and enter that in. Right now, I already have volumes in there, but to give you an idea, I can hit enter or hit 0 for the total. So I'm looking at total customer, total material, and so I kind of have a starting point here. You can see if I go ahead and click seed volumes for budget, again, I'm going to run it for 2020 and 2021. I'm doing a 24 period. And it'll go ahead and refresh, and it's going to match my 2019 actuals here. So from that standpoint, I can come in here and I can say, well, we're going to assume that at a top level, maybe my volumes increase by 10%, something along those lines. I'm able to do that by just clicking on that top button and just saying plus 10%. Automatically updates from a top level, disaggregates all the way down through all my customers, through all my materials. So again, kind of the concept around flexible planning, being able to do this at all different levels. Notice that I'm doing this also at a full year. I can expand this out, and I could do this by quarter, by month, or again, by the full year, and allow that to aggregate down to my months, my periods, my quarters for me. I also can use my page filters to be very specific. Maybe I only care, maybe I'm the user for Canada and I want to focus only on wholesale, right? So then I can start to get very specific with my country, the different customers I have, and the materials that are included. And, another good point to bring up here is just in using these templates and the flexibility of these, if there is kind of the capability, the option, or somebody asks the question, hey, I need to actually see this a different way. The ability to make changes. If I go ahead and go into my designer, right, I'm going to go ahead and edit this just to kind of showcase this real fast. I can go into my builder here, and very simply, can I move material and customer around? So now I'm actually looking at, let me close that out. So now I'm able to see it in a different view. I'm actually able to see by my material who my customers are and the volumes that we're planning for each one of those. So again, this may be more at a bottoms up. I can come in and I can make small changes. I know specific things that are happening with their contracts or other that allow me to do that. Okay, so just kind of, again, at a high level, talking about some of the template capabilities, functionality from a planning perspective, as well as using those data actions to be able to really seed your volumes already have a starting point. All right. So let me go ahead and close out of here. Once my volumes are completed, we also have then additional drivers. So very similar to seeding the volumes, what we have here in our sales and margin planning is we're calculating the historical actual average price. Right? So we're doing that for price, we're doing that for discounts, for rebates, and then we're taking those actual calculations, and again, we're seeding the budget. Right? So here I can see what my pricing is for each one of right here I have it by material group. And so what's a nice call out or neat about this is that these are actually, by default, Analytics Cloud, we're aggregating up, right? Whether we disaggregate or we enter things in at the base level, it normally will sum everything up. Well, there's exception or other aggregation types where, in this case for pricing, we want to take the average. So I can come in here and I can change, perhaps my price for all of my personal care products, we're going to say it's actually going to average out closer to $42 now. I know it's very expensive, personal care items. What it does is you can see here that it, again, will push it down so that the items, the material groups underneath it will go ahead and average out to my $42. So again, kind of a nice functionality to be able to do that where, in other planning solutions, it's difficult to achieve that, where everything is just by default summing and aggregating up. So just a call out there on that where, again, template, we can make as many changes at a high level, at a total level, very similar to volume. Again, similar thing with discounts. I won't cover given our time here, but you can see here just copied over from our actuals and then allows us to make any changes to our drivers. So finally, we have kind of our sales review tab here, and I don't have my budget yet, my bottoms up budget. I have my calculation, my calculate net sales data action, so I'm going to go ahead and run that. And that's going to take all the drivers, the pricing, the volumes, and perform that calculation to automatically refresh and update my budget. So now I'm able to see here's my annual budget as well as here's my target. Right? So they're going to be happy because the bottoms up is actually predicting more, planning for more. So in any case, that's really, again, from kind of a data action perspective, kind of from start to end with the gross sales portion of it. We can go ahead and gross sales as well as net as well as walking to net, we can calculate all those out. Okay. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to cover off the revenue planning assumptions piece, but at a high level, what that is if your sales and your revenue would not be 100% recognized in the same month, there is capabilities and drivers to be able to enter in kind of global assumptions into Analytics Cloud that allows you to push that revenue out, right? Sale might be recognized in 1 month, but you're actually not going to see that revenue for 4 months down the line, 5 months down the line. So this functionality allows you to do that and allows you to plan that way. Standard costing is very similar to what we're talking about on the sales side. This allows us to enter in standard cost rates. You can see here I've got different measure filters. So I have my overhead, I have my direct labor standard rates, and as I go ahead and change between those filters, I'll go ahead and change what my standard rates are here. Similar to what we did for the pricing, we can calculate and produce those actuals, and we pre-seed it. Because again, this way we have a starting point, and we can make adjustments. This also, again, very much helps when we're looking at if we're doing it at a more summarized level and we're disaggregating. Calculating COGS, so here I can see my net sales number. I can go ahead and run my COGS. Similar as what I did with my net sales, and we should go ahead and that will calculate, and we'll see our COGS pop in. There we go. Okay. So now if I come back, again, just at a high level, I can come back, and now after I've completed sales, cost of goods sold, it comes back, I can see where my annual budget versus my target versus that predictive plan, which is off the historical, and kind of do some comparisons against those different versions. Okay, so really nice and easy to be able to complete all those different views of my plan, in an effective manner. As far as, and then I got, again, because our time, I want to focus a little bit now on the expense side and some of the key components and functionality there. If you do have questions on there, some companies that are interested in transfer planning on the transfer pricing side, we do also have some content and templates and calculations, functionality, data actions that go along with the transfer pricing as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of our sales and margin planning launchpad and go back to our finance dashboard. And real quick, I'm going to go ahead and click on our expense planning, kind of switch gears from gross profit to now bottoms up on the expense side of the house, where we have more of our cost center planning. And before, we talk a little bit around functionality just with some of the templates and what you see here, I'm actually going to go back and open up our HR planning. So while we have cost center planning, you can see here, I just have an example of my payroll expense, right? So we have salaries. This, because you can see it's shaded in gray, this cell is locked. It does not allow the cost center managers or the users to enter in data. You can't see right now, but I'm actually, if I try to press on, it won't allow me to key anything in. And that's by design, because we are actually receiving this information from my HR model, my HR planning. And so we will come back to this and be able to show you kind of the example of where I'm updating my salary information and really transferring that, pushing that back over, right? So that information is fed. I'm able, as, again, somebody who is building up the cost center budget, to be able to come in and see not individual salaries, but really just a total salary line that helps me, in my overall planning process. So if I head back over and I click on my HR planning, So here we are, very similar to sales and margin. We're in another launch pad where we have our HR compensation planning and our process steps. So a couple of these, just to kind of talk through them, what we have set up as far as kind of our accelerator. We've got steps 1 and 2. These are admin steps that they're not really links. These are things that you would have to do in preparation of the budget season. Being able to update your dimension with your employees and your positions. So if there's any additional employees, positions, you may be doing this if you are also recording and receiving actuals anyway. But if not, that's certainly something that you need to prepare and kind of, have that available and ready before the actual planning templates are used. In addition to that, we want to load in our base pay. Right, so coming from an HR system or whatnot, we can go ahead and upload base pay. We can, if that's, again, from an integrated perspective, we can pull that information into SAC as well. But either way, those are kind of 2 requirements that we would do, or that more of an administrator would probably do in advance of using these templates and these stories. So step 3, just kind of talking at a high level, these are global assumptions. These are probably more budget manager, budget admin tasks. These are things like setting global assumptions. Maybe there's a merit increase across the board, that's 3%. Maybe there's percent of salaries for payroll taxes or other. So this gives you, FICA caps. This gives you the capability to this admin template here, which I won't go too far into, but that's really what's behind the scenes. That's what we're doing here, is really just entering in global assumptions to be able to use later on in all of our calculations for our employees. What I will click on the cost center input template. I'm sorry, the employee by cost center. And just call out a couple things here, again, when we're looking at our HR planning. So here is similar to the admin global assumptions. These are specific inputs that you can make for all employees across the board. So 401k, if there's any specific overtime or other, these are just some buckets that you could use that, again, instead of having to key things in all the time, if it should be globally across that cost center, you can go ahead and input that here. And that's, we're kind of just keeping it simple here and just showing a handful of different cost centers. So let me go to step 2 here in my story. And, perhaps, again, I have my story filters at the top. So right now I'm looking at all of my whole group of cost centers. I can certainly come up here and maybe we just focus on sales just to make it a little bit cleaner, because I know this is kind of a busy template when you're looking at everything. So let me just come up here. I'm going to change my story filter to sales so that it's hopefully a little bit more manageable to read there for you. And so you can see here, I have my cost center. I have all my employees listed, whether they're active or inactive, the positions that they hold, and whether they're full-time, equivalent, or part-time. What's been loaded is that annual pay for us, and then you'll notice that the areas shaded in yellow give us the ability to make adjustments. So if there's going to be adjustments to the annual pay, if the merit increases actually should be overridden and looking for approval, we can create and change those. You can include comments if you were to override the standard or the global assumption that was 3%. Here, I know this probably looks a little bit funny. This is more from a demo perspective and showing people how the functionality works. But you have start month and end month, and you may not know that your employee is going to start in month 2 and end in month 5, obviously. But more from a perspective, you probably have most starting hopefully in month 1 and ending in month 12, but you may have some that are rolling off, or probably maybe more specifically if they're going to be starting in a particular month in your cost center, you can apply that as well. That all helps with, and kind of all of these drivers will go into the overall compensation and benefits calculation here in step 4. So again, I can come in here and I can change any number, I can update any number, and it'll go ahead and make that change for me and tell me it made an update. And that's fine. So this is all for existing employees, right? This is just going in, making sure that for your existing employee base in your cost center, that this is what we're going to plan for the year. In addition to that, we have our third tab, which is around new employees. Right? So again, here I have just my sales, focusing just on my sales cost center. I can see here I've got basically, typically placeholder or dummy IDs for within my employee dimension. That would be a new hire 1, new hire 2, new hire 3. So within my new hire 1, I also have different positions. So I see here that I'm going to plan on hiring an area sales director, a sales manager, a marketing specialist. Maybe I want to also include a senior accountant in as a new hire for next year as well. So I can do that, and I can just put in what I think is what is going to be the base pay, and maybe we're going to start that at the beginning of Q2, and we would hope that they will be staying with us throughout the year, so we're going to plan for that. Once I do that, I have to run my data action. And what this does is it basically says I'm going to actually limit this to sales, but it's going to recalculate what my FTE is. And of course, this is important for our overall calculations on our taxes, on our FICA, our FICA caps, and things along those lines. That allows us. So once I do that, you'll notice that I added this. It's going to go ahead and show here off to the side that it is automatically now calculating a full-time equivalent. Okay, so now I have that new employee that I've added. And if I look down here, again, I'm focusing just on sales, and I look down here to my new hire, I had those other ones, but there's my senior accountant. There's the amount that I just added, so that's all added in there. What I don't see is obviously anything calculated. So here, again, along with what we've seen throughout the demonstration, is these data actions that are nice and easy and accessible to, you're not going through a number of different, this is one of the things that working with other solutions I find that I like a lot, is because these data actions are right on the screen, I'm not going into a folder, going into a directory and looking at, 20 different packages or processes that I may have to run and I don't know because, not sure which one to run. So this is so nice to be able to have just that functionality to execute it right from my story. And so here I can say, okay, I'm selecting running budget, my base month, the year. I'm going to run this just on sales. I'm going to go ahead and click run. So at this point, what it's doing is it's taking all of our employees, but probably most importantly, it's taking the entire year, and it's running through to be able to calculate our different taxes, our benefits, the compensation part of it with, with our bonuses and so on and so forth. So all of those calculations we have sort of pre-built in there for us to use once this gets done running. So it does run and take probably a little bit longer because we could probably separate these out. What we've done in our example is kind of combine them all together, calculate the compensation, calculate the benefits, calculate the taxes. And so all of that is being done together at one time versus run separately. So while that finishes, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to open up, actually I'll just talk to you really quickly, the employee transfers. So this is another area where some companies have some heartburn around their HR planning, their headcount planning, is the transfers. And so just to show real fast, is just the data action. So we have created a data action that allows, very simply, you have all the prompts and it runs the calculation for you. So you're basically saying, okay, if I'm going to transfer an employee out, what is the month that it's being transferred out? And then you can select the employees that will be transferred out. You can select the entity that is being transferred in, select from which cost center, and then select to which cost center. Okay, so we're selecting from a cost center, we're putting it in a cost center. So that functionality we have developed so that and provided the easy prompts on the face of the screen so that you can easily be able to move your employees between cost centers as well. Okay, so that functionality does exist, allows you to have that ease. If I come back over here to that template, thank goodness, it's done running, and you can see now my senior accountant and the data that has been populated. If you're not familiar with planning and the stories and reporting, you'll notice that whenever there is a change to the data, it will go ahead and highlight that. So it's telling me that, I made a change to Marilyn's bonus, so that changed. So did the senior accountant. This is new data that changed. So it's highlighting to me, and then obviously my total sales number, my totals changed as well. So it's kind of nice as well to easily highlight what has changed after I ran and recomputed my comp and benefits calc. All right. So I'm just going to click on my cost center reporting then real fast and just kind of showcase, again, kind of going back to the data actions, but a different type of data action. To this point, we've run a lot of driver-based, and we also have run really what we consider a copy is really seeding. It's more of along the lines of a copy functionality that the data action holds that allows us to provide prior year data and seed into current year. And so here I have just a simple report in which I can see my salaries and wages, and I can see specifically my salaries here and the total. And so if remember when we started this before we focused on HR, we were in our cost center plan, right? So now that I have populated my sales, I can come over here, and this is focusing on my cost center sales. Here now I should be able to come into my launch pad, and now that if everything's been approved and we're comfortable with that, the next step is for the cost centers to complete finalize their budgets. So we can go ahead and push this over to our cost center. So again, what we're doing is using now the functionality out of a data action called the cross model. And so that allows us to push data, because certainly we're not going to include the HR data. One of the nice things that I should probably mention with Analytics Cloud is that you can have many more dimensions. You can have flattened hierarchies, and it really allows you to have better and flexible planning. But of course, something like workforce headcount planning is very secured, right? We want to make sure that's in a separate model. And so this is a perfect example of where I would use a cross-model copy, because I want to push that summarized data over to one of my other models that, again, may have kind of my core financial information in it. Sorry, let me go back here. And so now I can complete my cost center planning now that my HR piece is done. And so I go ahead and refresh. And if we take a look at my payroll, you can see that I have my $924,000. I go back to my HR planning model, there's my $924,000. Okay. So I can go ahead and close out of here. I was able to push that over. Now I can see I've got a view here of my sales, including my salaries, and I can come in and finish my plan. Again, I can do this at a full year. I could do this by month. I could have this broken down by quarter. But the capability is obviously just keying things in. The functionality, you can come in here and you can lock cells, right? So that's what we have done with payroll. There's probably other items. If depreciation comes in, for example, depreciation for us will be driven from our capital model. And so we would want to also lock that out as an example. So I can go ahead and, lock my cells that way. Okay. But again, just like any other template, either if there were drivers that you could apply, you could enter drivers. But as I mentioned, you also have the capability to use this as enter one by one, or we also have what we call kind of the mass entry that allows me to enter multiple at a time and then go ahead and process that. So again, but if we don't distinguish or we do not seed, so I've seen with customers as well, just like the sales side, where we seeded the budget with volumes and with pricing, we also seen doing that with expenses as well, because it just provides a nice, and then you can go ahead and make changes. With me just entering 20,000, if it is an even split, then you can go ahead and enter it in, and it would go ahead and spread that out for you. Okay. All right, so I see I'm getting close to time here, so just a couple other things that I will touch on and is already created for me, but you'll see here, I'll just highlight, is basically you can see I have the capability to execute also an allocation process. So if you're comfortable with data actions, you can have that button on the screen that we've executed a number of times. You also have your allocation functionality up top that allows us to execute an allocation process. So for example, I have profitability allocation. So here, I'm going to go ahead and cancel it because I already had that done for us. But typically, any general expenses that may be coming from my cost center, this is just at a summarized value, are actually going to be in my unassigned bucket. They're obviously not going to, so here I have it broken out by material group. If I collapse that, I've got consumer products, and then I have where my expenses are going to go, which is in my unassigned bucket. And so what my execute profitability allocation does is it actually takes and allocates those based on my net sales and allocates them out so that now I can start to look at more from a profitability standpoint, my budget, and look at it in that view. Okay, so from an allocation, the allocation functionality, that's pretty common, pretty typical that we see companies using as well from kind of the allocation functionality standpoint. Okay, the last thing that I will probably have time to cover here is if I go back just at a high level, is kind of the capital planning. If you'd like to have more information on the CapEx side, we'd be happy to show you, provide a demonstration of it. You can see here, very similar to what we've done with sales and margin and HR. We've got kind of our launch pad where we have different steps and a process aligned with capital planning. And so we have we've got different data actions to be able to calculate our depreciation, as well as if I draw your eyes over to the right, we have some more over here that will basically similar to the HR example that we just did, to push that forecast out and then to copy it from kind of a working forecast to an approved public version forecast. But one of the other things to kind of showcase just from an overall template standpoint that you're rolling out to your users, which I think is a nice touch, is a lot of times we will add, you can see kind of our instructions and definitions page. Right? So thinking about this as you're rolling it out to your planning network of users, having a tab here that allows some nice descriptions and instructions on how to complete the necessary steps in this story. So you can see here it kind of lists it out, as well as gives you some examples or definitions. People might be confused. What does this mean? The other functionality real fast to just showcase that I like to call out from a planning perspective is, and it usually when I think of this functionality, adding projects on the fly is has always been a pain point in capital planning and some solutions. And so, being able to quickly come in here and I can go in and I can right click and I can add a member, right? So this allows me to really come in and start to, I can see here, I can follow the same convention as far as like PR. Looks like the next one in line is 0109. No, maybe not. And so I can go in and I can go ahead and add that member directly to my template. And so this is kind of what we consider, on the fly, master data in a sense, because it'll go ahead and it'll update that to your dimension without having to, go back to the dimension, add it, then tell the user it's there. Right? So there's a lot of nice functionality from that standpoint as well. All right. So I'm coming up on time here. The other thing that I didn't get a chance to really focus on, but just to kind of show you, I can go back to my homepage. It wasn't on my Launchpad, but if you guys are familiar with, we also use from the homepage our catalog capability where we can also launch our different accelerators, our different solutions here. And one of the other areas that we're building up is really around kind of balance sheet planning. Here is just an example from a working capital perspective, being able to have the drivers such as you have like your DSO and DPO, those different key metrics that you can go ahead and modify. If I come in here and I change my DSO, for example, I'm going to see my accounts receivable automatically update as well. It must know that it's time to wrap up here. So apologize if that didn't work out exactly how I had planned, but that is conceptually the way that kind of the planning side of it from working capital is handled. So we, again, try and use similar to every other driver when we're looking at specific working capital accounts, we can leverage some of those drivers to help facilitate and to help automate. So as your sales numbers change, your DSO automatically changes, which then in turn can automatically update some of your, your working capital accounts or accounts receivable, so on and so forth. All right. So I'm going to switch back here. I just have a minute before we go. I wanted to stop sharing this and just talk quickly. I didn't mention it earlier, but if we are holding a virtual event in the June 10th, so early, mid-June, and we will be having presentations by SAP, by us, Simplify Solutions, as well as a customer use case. So it's going to be very informative, good session to join. We do probably, what I'm excited for as well is our virtual workshop. So you can kind of see here some of the things that are going to be covered. This is actually going to be a virtual hands-on workshop that you will get some exposure to Analytics Cloud for planning. So I'll kind of wrap up here. Hopefully you were able to see some content that was meaningful, that could help you along your planning road as you look towards using and utilizing Analytics Cloud for planning. If you do have questions, if you do need assistance, I'd be happy to help answer. Hopefully we were able to answer some of your questions today. But if you do have other questions or want to see additional content, please feel free to contact me, and I'll do my best to help you out. So with that, Dominika, I think we can wrap things up.
Great. Thank you, Beth. And thank you all so much for your participation and your engagement today. We got a ton of questions. So as Beth said, make sure to write down her phone number, her email address, or download the slides. It's also there if you want to get in touch with Simplify. And then before we wrap up for today, I'll mention two more things. So a few of you were asking if this webinar is recorded. So we will be sharing a link to the recording in about an hour or two over an email. So everyone who registered for this webinar will get that email. So you can refer to this webinar later on, or if you missed some of it. And then the last thing I would mention is our survey. So it really helps us if you guys give us feedback on how you like today's session and any future sessions that you're interested in. So you can access the survey by clicking on the 3 smiley faces on the bottom toolbar. And it's only 2 questions, so it shouldn't take too long. All right, so that is it for today. Thank you so much, Beth, for a great demo. It was really interesting, especially because it took up most of the webinar. So it was really hands-on. Thank you, Beth, so much for that. And we'll see you all in the next webinar. Thank you.